It's funny how betrayal never announces itself, it just arrives dressed in success. Ethan didn't just break my heart. He traded it for a corner office and a fancier suit. The night New York swallowed my tears, I realized ambition could smell like expensive cologne and deceit. 3 years later, the skyline hadn't changed, but I had. My name was Lucas Hayes, CFO of one of the biggest media firms in the country, and I'd finally learned how to smile through the sting. The man who had once ruined me was nothing more than a ghost. Or so I thought, until I saw him walk through the glass doors of my husband's company. It took less than a heartbeat for my world to tilt. Ethan Cooper, the man who'd left me for power, now stood in the lobby, a new hire under my husband, Daniel Hayes, the CEO, the man who had loved me, saved me, worshipped me in ways Ethan never did. The irony burned sweetly. I watched from the mezzanine as Ethan handed over his paperwork, his smile polite, his posture careful. He'd always known how to perform. But when his eyes lifted and met mine through the glass, the air between us fractured. 3 years of silence cracked open like thunder. I didn't approach him that day. I wanted him to feel at first the weight of proximity, the ghost of everything he threw away. But Ethan was never patient. He found me 2 days later in the company's private lounge, a place reserved for executives and their spouses. Lucas. He breathed out my name like it was a prayer and a punishment. I looked up from my tablet, cool and calm. Mr. Cooper, I greeted. Congratulations on the job. Daniel seems impressed. He winced at the formality, the distance that used to never exist between us. You're married to him. His voice cracked slightly, though he tried to hide it behind a smirk. Guess you always did land on your feet. I met his eyes, that same shade of ocean after a storm. I learned from the best. It was petty, I know, but revenge has a flavor all its own, bittersweet and addictive. That night, when Daniel came home, he wrapped his arms around me, pressing a kiss to the back of my neck. He smelled of oak and citrus, grounding, real. Rough day, he murmured. I smiled faintly. Just ghosts from another life. He chuckled softly, unaware of the emotional hurricane he'd invited into our house. You always did have interesting ghosts. Days turned into weeks and the tension built. Ethan was everywhere, meetings, events, corporate dinners. Every glance across the table felt like a confession neither of us wanted to make. He looked thinner now, sharper around the edges, like guilt had been carving him down. Daniel, meanwhile, was proud of his promising new hire. He often invited Ethan to dinner, which meant I had to sit across from the man who once swore he'd never betray me, watching him force a smile as Daniel poured wine. I could feel his jealousy seeping through his mask. Every time Daniel's hand brushed mine, Ethan's eyes darkened. Every laugh I shared with my husband was another twist of the knife. It should have satisfied me. But late at night, when Daniel fell asleep beside me, my mind betrayed me, replaying Ethan's voice, the way he used to whisper, "You're everything I'll ever want," and how easily he'd thrown that away for a chance to climb higher. One evening, after a corporate gala, I found Ethan waiting outside by the valet. The city lights shimmered across his face, making his expression unreadable. You still love him? He asked. Daniel. I tilted my head. Of course I do. He stepped closer, his voice low. No. Me. I laughed, a brittle sound. You love your ambition, Ethan. Always have. He looked pained, desperate even. I thought I did, until I saw you again. Until I saw him with you. I didn't move, but my pulse betrayed me, beating wildly against my chest. The air between us was too charged, too alive. You made your choice? I said, forcing steadiness into my tone. I made a mistake, he whispered. And I've been paying for it every damn day. For the first time in years, I saw not the arrogant man who left me, but the boy who used to sketch stars on napkins, the one who dreamed of making something of himself and of us. I hated how part of me still wanted to believe him, but love, I'd learned, was no longer enough. Daniel appeared then, smiling, unaware. He slipped his arm around my waist, his warmth immediate. Ethan stepped back, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly. Everything okay here? Daniel asked. Perfect, I said, smiling at my husband. but my eyes stayed locked on Ethan's on the storm gathering behind them. By the end of that week, the power dynamic had shifted. Ethan wasn't just my ex, he was now directly under Daniel's supervision. The closer he got to my husband, the more twisted everything became. Daniel trusted him, saw potential in him. Ethan, in turn, seemed torn between professional loyalty and something more volatile, the wreckage of what we used to be. It was a game none of us wanted to admit we were playing. Daniel adored me, he called me his muse, his calm in the chaos. But he didn't know he'd hired the chaos itself. And Ethan, he wasn't content to stay a ghost. He started leaving traces, lingering glances, late-night emails, subtle reminders of a past I thought I'd buried. Until one message changed everything. "Does he know who I was to you?" My hands shook as I deleted the email, but the damage was already done. The lines between revenge and regret had blurred beyond repair. Because deep down, I wasn't sure what scared me more, that Ethan still loved me, or that I might still love him back. And the real tragedy? We were all standing in the same house of glass, pretending the cracks didn't exist. There's a thin line between control and chaos, and somehow we were dancing right on it. Started small, the unraveling. Ethan began staying later at the office, claiming he was working on a new campaign Daniel assigned him. Daniel, proud of his rising star, kept praising him at home. "Ethan's got the kind of hunger I used to have," he'd say, sipping his wine as if he didn't just twist a knife into my ribs. I'd smile, nod, and murmur something non-committal while my pulse beat too fast. Because the truth was, I knew that hunger. I'd been its meal once. One Friday night, I went to Daniel's office to drop off some documents he'd forgotten. The floor was nearly empty, just the hum of city lights through the windows. But through the glass wall of a smaller conference room, I saw Ethan. He was leaning against the table, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up, staring at the skyline like it owed him an apology. He looked lost. I told myself to walk away, but something in his posture, the slumped shoulders, the quiet defeat held me there. "Burning the midnight oil?" I asked, stepping in. He turned, startled. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then a small, sad smile appeared. "Old habits," he said. "Work feels better than sleeping lately." I folded my arms. "Still chasing promotions?" He let out a soft laugh, bitter, tired. "Not this time. There's nothing left to chase." The silence that followed felt heavy, intimate. I hated it. "Lucas," he began, his voice cracking slightly, "I'm not proud of what I did, but I was scared. You were everything I wanted, and I thought if I didn't make it big, I'd lose you anyway. So you lost me first." I finished for him, my voice sharper than intended. He flinched. "Yeah," he whispered. "I guess I did." The next thing I knew, we were closer, not touching, but close enough to feel the electricity that used to exist between us. The air smelled like coffee and regret. "I didn't think you'd still look at me like that," he said quietly. "Like what?" "Like you remember." I swallowed hard. "You're married to your job now, Ethan. I've moved on." His gaze softened. "Then why are you here?" I didn't have an answer, and he knew it. That night, I came home later than usual. Daniel was already in bed, his laptop open beside him. He looked up, smiling sleepily. "You okay?" "Yeah," I lied. "Long day." He reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "Don't let work eat you alive, babe. That's my job." I laughed softly, but inside, my guilt twisted. Because the truth was, I didn't even know what I felt anymore. Guilt, anger, longing, it was all tangled. Over the next few weeks, Ethan became impossible to ignore. He wasn't trying to seduce me, not in the obvious way. It was the small things. The way his hand brushed mine when passing a file, the quiet "good morning" that carried more meaning than it should. The way he'd glance at me during meetings when Daniel praised him. Each moment felt like a spark, one I was desperately trying not to ignite. And then, one evening, the match was struck. Daniel had thrown a company celebration, a rooftop party overlooking the Hudson. Music, laughter, champagne. I played my usual role, the charming, poised husband, smiling for the cameras and investors. But when I stepped away from the crowd to catch some air, Ethan followed. The night was too beautiful, too fragile. The city glowed beneath us, and his voice came out low, trembling slightly. Do you ever think about us? I didn't turn around. Sometimes. Do you hate me? I did. For a long time. And now, I faced him. Now I just wish it had meant less. He took a step closer. But it didn't, did it? I could feel his breath, warm and unsteady. Don't, I whispered. He didn't listen. His hand brushed mine, that single, reckless touch, and suddenly the world tilted. The rooftop, the lights, the noise, everything disappeared except for him. I pulled away before it could go any further. This isn't fair, I said. To Daniel. To me. To you. He laughed bitterly. Since when has love ever been fair? And then he left, disappearing into the night. After that, I avoided him, ignored his calls, his glances. But distance didn't fix anything. It only made the silence louder. Then one morning, Daniel dropped a bomb. I'm promoting Ethan, he said over breakfast, eyes shining with pride. He's earned it. My heart sank. To what position? Director of Strategy. He'll be working closely with me. And with you. I almost dropped my coffee. Of course he would. The following weeks were unbearable. Ethan and I were forced into endless meetings, late nights, joint presentations. The more we tried to act professional, the more the tension grew. Every argument turned personal. Every silence turned dangerous. One night, after a particularly heated strategy meeting, Ethan slammed his papers down. Why are you so angry, Lucas? Because you don't get to come back into my life and pretend we're just co-workers. I shot back. He stared at me, chest heaving. You think I want this? To see you every day and not touch you? To watch him love you the way I should have? The room felt too small, the air too heavy. Ethan, I'd trade every damn promotion just to have one more night where you looked at me the way you used to. My throat went dry. Don't do this. He stepped closer, his voice breaking. You think I don't know you still feel it too? And God help me, I did. Before I could stop myself, I kissed him. It was reckless, wrong, intoxicating. Years of anger and longing collided in that single, breathless moment. But as soon as it happened, I pulled away. This can't happen, I whispered. Not again. He nodded, eyes glassy. Then tell me how to stop loving you. I didn't have an answer. The days after were torture. Every time Daniel kissed me, I felt like a fraud. Every time Ethan looked at me, I saw the weight of our mistake. Until one afternoon, Daniel called me into his office. His tone was quiet, unreadable. Ethan handed in his resignation today. My heart skipped. What? Why? He leaned back, studying me. He said he couldn't work here anymore. Said something about crossing a line. The silence stretched. Lucas, he said softly. Is there something I should know? My stomach turned to ice. No, I said too quickly. Nothing. He nodded slowly, but I could see the doubt flicker behind his eyes. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, torn between relief and heartbreak. Because Ethan leaving should have made things easier, but all it did was carve a hollow space where the chaos used to be. A week passed. Then two. No calls, no texts. Then one evening, a letter arrived at my office. No name on the envelope, just my address. Inside, a single page. I couldn't stay because loving you in silence felt worse than losing you all over again. You once told me ambition would destroy me, you were right. But maybe leaving now means I can finally start becoming someone who deserves the kind of love I threw away. Thank you for teaching me what it meant to have something real. I'll carry that forever. I stared at the words until they blurred. My heart ached in a way that was both familiar and final. That night I went home early. Daniel was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, cooking dinner, something simple, something warm. He looked up, smiling softly. Hey, you look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe I have, I murmured, stepping closer. He reached out, brushing my cheek. Whatever it is, you're here now. That's all that matters. And for the first time, I realized he was right. Ethan was my past, my lesson in pain, love, and ambition. Daniel was my present, steady, imperfect, and real. But deep down, I knew the truth. The heart never forgets its first wound. It just learns to live with the scar. Weeks later, during a conference in Boston, I caught a glimpse of Ethan across the hall. He was different, calmer, lighter. He didn't see me at first, but when our eyes finally met, he smiled, not the charming grin I remembered, but something peaceful. I smiled back. No words, no bitterness, just closure. And as he turned and walked away, I finally felt the weight lift. Love hadn't destroyed us after all, it had reshaped us. Maybe that's what redemption really looks like. It's strange how peace can arrive disguised as confession. A month after seeing Ethan again in Boston, I thought everything had finally settled. My marriage felt steady, quiet in the way calm seas are after a storm. Daniel and I had found our rhythm again, or at least I thought we had. Then one night he said it. I know. We were sitting in our living room, the soft hum of the city outside our windows. I froze, my glass halfway to my lips. "Know what?" I asked, though I already knew. Daniel looked at me, not angry, not cold, just heartbreakingly calm. "About you and Ethan." The air left my lungs. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm not stupid, Lucas. I saw the way you looked at each other. The tension, the silence. I tried to ignore it, because I thought maybe if I didn't ask, it wouldn't be real. I couldn't speak." He continued quietly, "But love doesn't disappear just because you change the subject. And I think, I've always known you never stopped loving him, at least a part of you." Tears stung my eyes. "Daniel, it wasn't. I'm not asking for excuses," he said gently. "I'm asking for honesty." So I told him everything. Not every detail, some things are too sacred, too painful, but enough. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the years between, the moment that shouldn't have happened. When I finished, Daniel didn't move. He just sat there, breathing slowly, eyes glistening under the dim light. "I loved you," he said softly. "Still do. But I can't pretend that knowing this doesn't hurt." "I never wanted to hurt you," I whispered. "I know." He reached for my hand, hesitated, then took it anyway. "But maybe love isn't about never hurting each other. Maybe it's about choosing what kind of hurt we can live with." We didn't speak much after that, but something shifted. There were no screaming matches, no broken glasses, just silence and understanding. Over the next few weeks, we talked more than we had in months. About dreams, regrets, the people we used to be. And slowly, the wound between us began to heal, not perfectly, but enough to breathe again. Then, one morning, Daniel handed me an envelope. Inside was a flight ticket. "San Francisco," I read aloud. He smiled faintly. "You said once that closure isn't found in conversations, it's found in choices. Ethan's working there now. If you need to see him one last time, go. Then come back, and let's start over clean, honest." My throat tightened. "You'd let me do that?" He nodded. "Because I trust you'll come back." 2 days later, I was standing outside a small cafe in downtown San Francisco. The wind smelled like ocean salt and new beginnings. Ethan was inside, hunched over a laptop, wearing glasses and a faded denim jacket so different from the man I once knew. He looked up and froze. Then, slowly, that same small, peaceful smile appeared. "Lucas," he said softly, standing up. "Ethan." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he gestured toward the chair across from him. "Coffee?" I sat down. The familiarity was strange, comforting, and foreign at once. "You look good," he said after a pause. "So do you," I replied. "You seem lighter." He laughed. "Guess I finally stopped running." We talked for hours about work, life, what came after. There was no bitterness, no longing, just two people who had loved each other deeply once, finally able to breathe in the same air without bleeding. When I stood to leave, he said quietly, "Does he know you're here?" "Yes," I said. "He told me to come." He nodded slowly, eyes soft. "He's a good man." "He is." Ethan looked down, smiling faintly. "Then love him right this time." I felt tears sting again, not of pain, but of gratitude. "I will," I whispered, and for the first time since everything began, I knew I meant it. When I returned to New York, Daniel was waiting at the airport. No grand gestures, no questions, just open arms and a quiet look that said, "You came back." I stepped into his embrace, feeling something click into place, the kind of peace that only comes after surviving chaos. We drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past. At a red light, Daniel reached over, took my hand and said, "You done chasing ghosts?" I smiled through the tears. "Yeah, I think they finally let me go." Months later, life felt normal again, not perfect, but beautifully human. Ethan sent a postcard once, a photo of the Golden Gate Bridge with a short message. "Thank you for letting me learn how to love, even if it wasn't forever." I pinned it to my office board. Not as a memory, but as proof that sometimes, love's greatest act is letting go. Daniel saw it one morning. He didn't say anything, just wrapped his arms around me from behind and whispered, "You ready for brunch?" And I realized that yes, I was ready. For brunch, for life, for every imperfect, beautiful thing that came next. Because love isn't always about forever. Sometimes it's about the people who teach you how to find it again, even after you've lost yourself in the process. And when I looked at Daniel that morning, sunlight pouring through the windows, I finally understood. I hadn't lost anything at all. I'd just been finding my way home. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.